On Christmas night in December of 1996, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey was abducted from her Colorado home. She was later found brutally murdered in the basement of her home. Her case is well over 24 years old and is one of the most notorious cold cases in America. The Ramseys described their daughter as a spark plug, talented, innocent, loving, and a very caring little girl. Patsy Ramsey, the mother to JonBenét, woke on the 26th early to make herself a coffee cup and prepare for a family trip to their summer cottage in Michigan. On her way down the stairs, she found 3 sheets of paper on the last 3 steps of their spiral staircase. Upon reading the first chilling words, Patsy ran to her daughter's room to see if the note contents were true. She screamed for her husband John, and they called 911 immediately. Now, before we go on, I want to throw some kidnapping statistics at you. According to the Polyclass Foundation, 99.8% of the children missing do come home. Nearly 90% of missing children have simply misunderstood directions or miscommunicated their plans, are lost, or have run away. 9% are kidnapped by a family member in a custody dispute. 3% are abducted by non-family members, usually during the commission of a crime such as robbery or sexual assault. The kidnapper is often someone the child knows. Only about 100 children, a fraction of 1%, are kidnapped each year in the stereotypical stranger abductions you hear about in the news. And then last, about half of these 100 children come home. The note read, "Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attached to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence a earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you not to provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory, SBTs. The call was to come around 8 to 10 a.m. That call would never be made. While waiting, Mrs. Ramsey suggested that her husband check around the house and see if the kidnappers left behind anything of JonBenét's or if they happened to leave anything out of place. Mr. Ramsey and the family friend walked to the basement almost immediately, and that's when the discovery was made. Wrapped in a white blanket was JonBenét Ramsey. The grief-stricken father knelt to examine his daughter, hoping, praying that she could somehow be alive or revived. He enveloped his daughter in his arms and carried her upstairs. Linda Arndt joined Mr. Ramsey as he laid his daughter on the floor. She checked to see if there was hope for the young girl. She could feel no breath expelling from her. "Is she dead?" John asked. "Yes, she's dead," Linda replied. What was supposed to be a kidnapping case soon turned into a murder investigation. Detectives sprang into action when they found the body of JonBenét. JonBenét had been sexually assaulted and strangled with a makeshift garrote. She was also hit over the head with an object, causing blunt trauma and cracking her skull. However, autopsy shows that the main cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. A nylon cord was found wrapped around her neck, her wrists were tied above her head, and duct tape covered her mouth. She was also sexually assaulted with a broken tip of a paintbrush from her mother's art set, which was also used for the garrote. It was unsure as to whether she was raped, and her genitals had been wiped clean. The suspect left behind blood found on her underwear, but authorities have been unable to identify in the National DNA Database who it belongs to. The autopsy also showed that JonBenét had pineapple in her stomach from the night before. John and Patsy couldn't recall giving their daughter pineapple, but JonBenét's 9-year-old brother Burke Ramsey's fingerprints was found on a bowl of pineapple in the kitchen. Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey argued that Burke was in his room all night, and detectives could not prove otherwise. There was a boot print beside JonBenét that did not belong to anyone else in the household, and the window of the basement was open to baffle detectives further. Law enforcement came up with 2 theories, the family theory or the intruder theory. The ransom note was the main reason behind the family theory. The paper was from the house, the pen, and the amount of money was the same as John Ramsey's bonus earlier that year, and the murder weapon still on JonBenét. After questioning and investigating, the Ramseys submitted handwriting samples to detectives. Both John and Burke were cleared of suspicion. Patsy Ramsey wasn't cleared, but there was no further evidence to prove she had written the note. The intruder theory had more to go off of. In the room where JonBenét was found was a boot print that didn't match any of the footprints of anyone in the household, as well as a broken window. The evidence that proved that someone else had possibly murdered JonBenét was the blood found on her underwear. When it comes to suspects, detectives automatically turn their sights on both John and Patsy. In cases like this, more often than not, the parents are the guilty party. Detective Linda Arndt, in an interview, recalls the events of that day and who she suspected from the start. As we looked at each other, I remember, and I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me and consciously counting out that 18 bullet. "Why did you do that?" the interviewer asked. To which Arndt replied, "Because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up." She made this statement after the body of JonBenét was found. She suspected John from the start. Burke Ramsey was implied to be the killer, but due to the DNA evidence found on his sister, he was later cleared. In 2016, Burke filed a $750 million lawsuit against CBS for defamation when they aired the case of JonBenét Ramsey and accused him. John Mark Carr, a school teacher, was arrested on suspicion of the murder of JonBenét. He claimed that he had committed the crime. However, the statements he made didn't match up with anything of the Ramsey case. 1, he wasn't in Colorado at the time of JonBenét's kidnapping and murder. 2, he claimed to have picked up JonBenét from school, drugged her, raped her, and then accidentally killed her. Drugs were not found in her system. While she had been sexually assaulted, it was unclear if she had been raped. The DNA found on JonBenét's underwear did not match Carr's, and it was clear that the person who killed her essentially got off on strangling her. Strangulation is far from accidental, which ruled him out. Another man named Gary Oliva came forward with prison letters claiming that he had killed JonBenét in 2019. He claimed that he was in love with her and that she fell and hit her head. Upon JonBenét's discovery, Oliva called a friend. A childhood friend recalled a time in high school when Oliva would create collages of little girls and set fire to them. Sobbing, he said that he had hurt a little girl. He fits the profile of a sadistic, pedophilic person. He has been a long-time suspect in the murder, but is currently serving a 10-year sentence for child abuse images. Still, to this day, no one has been charged. In 1999, a grand jury was prepared to indict the Ramseys for child endangerment and obstruction of a murder investigation. However, prosecutors felt the evidence was not enough and they declined to prosecute. From the start, all evidence gathered was either contaminated or pointed directly to the Ramseys. The first piece of evidence was the ransom note. Upon seeing how many pages it is, detectives easily concluded that it was a fake. Ransom notes are always straight and to the point. "We have your daughter, we want this amount of money," followed by a threat and a short set of instructions. This note, however, was meticulous. It was well thought out and very detailed. The writer wants to be known as a small foreign group, and they go out of their way to make spelling mistakes such as business, Bussines, instead of business with just 3 S's, and grammatical errors like using a instead of an. Red flags are also raised when the perpetrators ask for the money. Again, $118,000 is the amount of money that John Ramsey was to collect as a bonus that year. People looking for a ransom are very greedy. $118,000 is very specific, and normally people would ask for a larger amount of money, millions, billions if they possibly could. Whoever wrote this was trying to sound foreign, to make mistakes, to sound illiterate. That was their goal. Yet they know how to spell attache, and they use phrases like "and hence." It was noted that in their Christmas card, Patsy had written that same phrase, "and hence." That's not exactly enough evidence to conclude that the Ramsey family was guilty of the crime, but it was something that they noticed nonetheless. The note was also riddled with many movie references to movies like Dirty Harry and Ransom. The murder weapon used to strangle JonBenét was used with a paintbrush belonging to Patsy, which also raised red flags in the eyes of the detectives. But out of the note, the weapon, and the avoidance of the Ramsey parents, which they testified they did because they didn't want to be easy targets as suspects from law enforcement, there was no further evidence to prove that they had murdered their daughter. The DNA is what essentially lifted the suspicion off of the family. It did not match Burke's or John's or Patsy's, which confirmed yet again that this was an intruder. But who? The who is what has detectives hanging on to this case 24 years later, and John Ramsey is still fighting to find out that who and that why. His wife, Patsy Ramsey, was a stage 4 ovarian cancer survivor and was in remission for 9 years until a recurrence in 2002 that eventually took her life. She died on June 24th of 2006 at the age of 49. Detective Lou Smith dedicated his life to finding killers and putting them behind bars. Lou Smith solved at least 200 homicides, all of them ending in the victory of law enforcement and giving clarification to grieving family members. Until his death in August 2010, Smith dedicated his time to finding the killer of young JonBenét, and his family has now taken the mantle of discovering and solving the case. Detective Smith's granddaughters, Jessa and Lexi, have taken their grandfather's place. In conclusion, in 2010, it was discovered that the DNA found on JonBenét could possibly belong to 2 suspects. As we gain more knowledge and our technology grows, we come to know more about cases like this. And it's only a matter of time before the dark is brought to the light and the true killer is brought to justice.